chat here, and I'll take this for attendance. But yeah, if you can click on that link and just add your name. Yeah. Thank you. Supply and demand model. So it's the single most useful tool of economic analysis. So it explains how prices of goods and quantity bought and sold are determined in certain types of markets. So we're going to go through how supply and demand works and how to use it in this chapter. So what is demand? So demand is quantities of a particular good or service consumers are willing and able to buy at different possible prices. So the law of demand, consumers buy more of a good when its price decreases and less when its price increases. So when price goes up, demand goes down. When price goes down, demand goes up. So this makes sense because when something's cheaper, we buy more of it. So yeah, usually when something's cheaper, we buy more of it if we like to buy the product. And if it's more expensive, we buy less of it for the most part. So changes in income. So when income goes up, consumers buy more. So if you have more income, you're going to buy more goods for the most part. And then when income goes down, you're going to buy less goods. So that's usually the truth. In a lot of cases, you buy more when you have more income. And demand. So the demand for a product or service is how much of a product or service people are willing and able to purchase at various prices. So lower the price, higher the quantity demanded. In this case, it's usually a negative correlation in this case. However, there are some cases where people buy more when the price goes up. For example, the stock market, there are stocks that people buy more of when the price goes up because they think that the price will continue to go up. It's called momentum trading. So that's type of situation where they would still keep buying if the price keeps going up. And it's an effective strategy for growth stocks, but for it's not really effective for a lot of other things, but for stocks, it can be effective as a strategy sometimes. So generally, the relationship between price and quantity is negative. This means that the higher the price level, the lower will be the quantity demanded, and the lower the price, the higher will be the quantity demanded. So what is supply? So supply is the amount of a product that is offered for sale at all possible prices in the market. So law of supply. So it provides this incentive for companies to supply more because if they supply more, they can charge a higher price. So when price goes up, supply goes up. So they supply more when the price goes up because they know that they're going to get more sales out of it. They're going to get more revenue if they supply more. So that's why they supply more. So when production costs go up, supply goes down. So for example, for cars, if the production costs of Ford cars doubled, then they'd only produce half of the current Ford vehicles that they produce. So higher production costs, supply goes down, all else equal. So in this case, you have to keep everything else constant, and these are the only things that change, and everything else is held constant. So in this case, prices would be held constant, budgets would be held constant. It would just be only the production costs and supply that change. So in this case, is the supply curves is upward sloping, prices on the y-axis, quantity supplied is on the x-axis. And as you can see here, the quantity supplied of good X times price here. So it'd be 1 times 10 equals 20 here. So $1 times 10 equals 20. So when the price goes to $2, they can supply 20. So in that case, it'd be 2 times 20 here and make $40. So they make more in this case, so they'd supply more. And then when the price hits 3, they can supply 30. Now it's $90 in making, so they'll supply 30. And then here, 4 times 40, they make $160. So they're making more money. So they're making more money as the price goes up. They supply more. So that's why they supply more, because it's a good incentive. They are incentivized to supply more because they're going to make more money in that case. So I'll paste this into the chat. So they make a lot more money if they supply more in this case. So an increase in price will result in producers wanting to increase the quantity of a product that they will sell on the market, chasing profits. Therefore, the relationship between the price and supply is positive. The higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. So the equilibrium price is where the supply and demand intersect. So that's where they intersect. And I'll show you usually with this. So for example, right here, this is called shortage. So that is when demand is greater than supply. So people want more than what is currently produced. And then right above it is a surplus here. Surplus. So supply is less, supply is greater than demand. People, so producers are supplying more than what is currently, producers are supplying more than what is demanded. So based on this over time, the price goes to equilibrium. So in the long term, they meet in the middle here. So they start to meet in the middle here in the long term. So the shortage can happen short term, and the surplus can happen short term as well. Here, so this is short term here. So it could be above equilibrium in the short term or below equilibrium in the short term, and then in the long term it's at equilibrium. So it can be a surplus / shortage in short term. It can be equilibrium shown there. And then guns or butter. So definition, the decision of government to produce military goods or consumer goods. So there's a lack of a balance with providing military consumer goods, and the government struggles with that. So they usually, with the government, they usually support like one over the other, and there's no balance. So it's a struggle to balance the domestic and foreign policy, and they struggle with that constantly. And there are usually shortages in one area because they're focusing too much in another area. So it's usually one or the other. They're focusing too much on domestic or focusing too much on foreign policy. So it's very hard to balance both. So the production possibilities frontier is an economic model showing how an economic actor, such as a company or nation, could make trade-offs in the production of different commodities. So in this case, C right here. So I'll point out C for this one. So C here would be a recession. So this is recession where they are not producing to capacity. And then A and B. So A and B are efficient production levels. but there isn't enough balance with butter slash guns. So butter is domestic policy and guns are foreign policy. So you want to be you want to have more of a balance and being here, so being here in the middle. So like around here would provide a balance between the domestic and foreign policy. So if we got to here, if we redistributed to get to here, we would have a good balance. So if we redistributed income to get to here, there would be a good balance of foreign and domestic policy. And then D is unattainable unless we grow the economy. So that's the production possibilities frontier. That's how it works. So it shows the like what we'd have to do to get to D here. So we grow the economy and where we should be. We should be so in this case, we should be on the middle of the line. So that would ensure efficiency by being on the line and ensure equality through balancing both goods at equal levels. So that's how so this is a good showing of how to get equality and also efficiency. So that's it's an important graph. It can really show that you need a balance between both products and also efficiency is very important too. So those are two things that are required. I'm just gonna So determinants of demand, prices of related goods, substitutes, so two goods for which an increase in the price of one, other things equal lead to an increase in the quantity demanded of the other. Complements, two goods for which an increase in the price of one, other things equal leads to a decrease in the quantity demanded for the other. So there's taste, expectations, population. So we'll go through some examples of both here. So in this case, substitutes are goods you might purchase instead of another. So in this case, so if the price of Coca-Cola goes up, the quantity demanded of Pepsi will go down. So, sorry, will go up here because people will buy more of the cheaper Pepsi compared to Coca-Cola. So they would switch to Pepsi in this case. So yeah, if the price of Coca-Cola goes up, the quantity demanded of Pepsi will go up because people will buy more of the cheaper Pepsi compared to Coca-Cola. They would switch to Pepsi in this case. So that's what happens with substitutes because in this case, Coke and Pepsi are substitutes here. So factors of demand. So here, price or availability of substitution effect. So substitute is good that can be used in place of another. So if the price of Starbucks goes up, the quantity demanded of Dunkin' will go up because they will switch to Dunkin' because it's cheaper now. So if the price of Starbucks goes up, they'll switch to more buying more Dunkin' Donuts coffee because it's cheaper in comparison now. That's why. And then, example, rye bread and wheat bread. If rye bread goes on sale, demand for it will increase. Demand for wheat bread will decrease. If rye bread becomes more expensive, the demand for it will decrease. Demand for wheat bread will increase. So basically, if one becomes more expensive, the other, so if one becomes more expensive, people will switch to the other, basically. So that's how it works here. So complements are goods that are often purchased together. So if A and B are complements, a change in the demand of A causes the same change in demand for B. So we'll talk about some examples here. So prices or availability of complementary goods. So complementary goods are things that are often sold or used together. So usually you would buy you buy peanut butter and jelly together. So if the price of one of them went up, then you'd buy less of both of them because it would be more expensive. So in this case, if let's say the price of peanut butter went from $5 to $6, and so if the price of peanut butter went from $5 to $6, and the price of jelly stayed at $5, then if you bought both together, it would cost $11 combined instead of $10 before. Therefore, people would likely buy less of the combined peanut butter and jelly due to the higher price of both together. So that's what would happen with complements. People usually buy this stuff together, and if it becomes more expensive, they buy less of it, basically. So that's usually what happens with complements here. So I'll put this in the chat. So for hamburger and hamburger rolls, if hamburger meat goes on sale, the demand for hamburger will increase. This will cause the demand for hamburger rolls to increase also. If the price of hamburger meat skyrockets, demand for hamburger will decrease. This will cause the demand for hamburger rolls to decrease also. So yeah, these hamburger rolls and hamburger are bought together. So if one increases in price, then there's gonna be less of both bought together, basically, in this case. So I'll ask the class. So substitute or complement. So coffee and tea. Are coffee and tea substitute or complement? Yes. Excellent. Christabel, excellent. Perfect. And what about needle and thread?
Complement.
Yes. Excellent. And then marker and crayon. Yes. Substitute. Yeah. Excellent. So coffee and tea are substitutes due to an increase in consumer income, an increase in the price of substitute, or a fall in the price of complement. All other things being equal, this results in an increase in price and increase in quantity in the market. So if this, so like the demand curve shifts right due to an increase in income, and the demand curve shifts right when the price of a substitute increases. So like if this was the demand curve for Pepsi, the demand curve for Pepsi would shift right if the price of Coca-Cola went up. And then the demand for peanut butter would increase if the price of jelly went down. So can the class think of other examples of what can shift the demand curve, right?
If the cost of needles went down, would the demand for thread go up?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That'd be a good example. Yes, the cost of needles going down, demand for thread would go up. Yes. Any other examples of increase in demand? What causes it? That's all right. So here, the demand curve may shift left due to fall in consumer income, a fall in the price of substitute, or an increase in the price of complement. All other things being equal, this results in a decrease in price and a decrease in price and decrease in quantity in the market. So the supply curve may shift right due to an improvement in technology, a fall in production costs, or the introduction of a subsidy. All other things being equal, this results in a decrease in price and increase in quantity in the market. So in this case, the you can supply more if technology improves because they're more efficient. So for example, ChatGPT can improve supply because everything's being more efficient. Like if you're doing any sort of work that requires chat that can be enhanced by ChatGPT, you can produce more work. So your supply increases with that. Also, any type of automation, automated robots can improve can improve productivity. So that would improve supply of goods. And then a fall in production costs would allow for more products to be created with the same budget. For example, if the cost of cars went down by 50%, cost of production of cars went down by 50%, they could produce double the cars. So that would improve the supply of cars. And then a subsidy introduction would improve supply. So that would increase supply here. And then same thing, so it's the opposite here. So a supply curve may shift left as you increase in production costs with the introduction of tax. All other things being equal, this results in increase in price and decrease in quantity in the market. So increase in production costs, like I said, if the production cost of cars doubled, they would produce half the cars. And then introduction of tax, they'd be spending more money on taxes than on production. So production would decrease because they'd pay more in taxes. So let's go through the graphs here. So like we said before, the shortage, so surplus would be this, where it's excess supply. That'd be surplus. And then excess demand would be shortage here. So that's what happens with if demand and supply don't equal each other here. So yeah, surplus is when supply is greater than demand. When quantity supplied is greater than demand. And shortage is when quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. So yeah, that's that there. So we'll talk about here normal and inferior goods. So a normal good is anything that you buy more of when your income increases. And then so normal good, you buy more of it if your income increases. So with that, I'll ask the class, what would you buy more of if your income increased?
Vacations?
Yes, vacations would be great, normal good. Yes. Excellent. They're also called luxury goods too. So normal and luxury goods are the same thing. Anything else? What else would you buy more of if you had more income?
Clothes?
Yes, exactly. That's a like a good example. Excellent. And then inferior good, yeah, local food, that's a good one. Local food, it's usually at a premium compared to food that you get from any grocery store. So that's a good idea. That's a good example. So inferior goods are goods that you buy more of when your income. So inferior goods are goods that you buy less of when your income goes up. So the definition here is actually incorrect. Sorry about that. So I'll just cross this out here. So here so you actually buy more, you buy less of it when your income increases. So can you think of any examples?
Maybe like processed food.
Yes, that's a good example. Processed food. Yeah, processed food would be a good example. Yeah, so you'd switch to used car, exactly. So you would switch your consumption from, let's say, processed food to local food, and then used car. So Monica said used car, so you'd switch your consumption from a used car to a new car, maybe. So you're switching your consumption from inferior goods to normal goods. So that's usually what happens. However, when you make more income, it's probably a good idea to still use a lot of inferior goods just for savings. Because the problem is when you make more income, the your cost of living goes up if you're gonna just buy normal goods. So you have to maintain that level of spending. Like you'll have to maintain that level of income to cover the spending. So that is an issue that you would have to deal with. So if you stayed with buying inferior goods when you have higher income, you can just save the rest. So that would be a good money, like that would be a good money situation if you just kept buying inferior goods because you could just save the rest, invest it, and however that's not usually the case. But if I had higher income, yeah. So if I had higher income, I would still buy inferior goods because I would want to save money. But it's but statistically, people buy more normal goods in that case. So the in this case, this is statistically usually what happens here. So the inferior goods, as income goes up, you buy less inferior goods, and as income goes up, you buy more normal goods. So statistically, this is usually what happens in most cases. So yeah, they substitute for normal goods instead of inferior goods. So macroeconomics, we went through this last week, but overview. So a branch of economics that studies how an overall economy behaves. So it's all across the whole economy. Microeconomics is a study of how individual actors make choices in response to changes in incentives, price of resources, and or methods of production. So microeconomics is like buying a Tim Hortons coffee. That's really what it studies, not the full economy. And microeconomics, like I said, it's more about buying from a business. Macroeconomics is the whole economy. GDP is counting all the value of goods and services produced in the year. So it combines everything that was produced during the given year. Perfect competition is a theoretical market structure in which there are no monopolies. So we'll talk a bit about this. The Perfect competitive market has four conditions. There are many buyers and sellers. Sellers offer identical products. Buyers and sellers are well informed about their products, and sellers are able to enter and exit the market freely. So, can you think? Can you think of an example of perfectly competitive market? So, have you come across anything that is similar to this?
Electronics or something?
Yeah, electronics is pretty close. So, Facebook Marketplace is a good example too. That's a good one. So Facebook Marketplace, there's a lot of competition, identical, like almost all, well, it's okay. Almost identical products. Buyers and sellers are well informed, sort of, because you don't know exactly the condition, because the photos can like be fake or they might be lying. Also, but sellers are able to enter and exit the market freely, so that's true about the Facebook Marketplace. There are many buyers and sellers, so yeah, meets a lot of that criteria. And then the so Ben, which one? What did you say, Ben?
Electronics, like
Electronics. Oh, go ahead.
I was talking mostly like phones, like cell phones and stuff.
Yes, that's it's close. So the cell phone market is pretty close to perfectly competitive. It's more monopolistically competitive. It's monopolistic competition similar, where but the only difference to that is they can differentiate on certain things. So so based on that, they can price differently because they differentiate based on brand or operating system. So like Apple and Android, they differentiate on operating system and brands. They can charge different prices based on that. So that's really the only difference, but everything else meets this criteria. So good job on that one. And then Monica said farmers market. So that could meet the criteria too. Many buyers and sellers. The products are very close identical. That's true. You can get a lot of information of the products online, and then you can enter and exit the market freely. Yeah, so farmers market would be a good example. So yeah, great examples, everyone. So the perfect competition market, if you're going to invest, you wouldn't want to invest in any company that is in perfect competition because perfect competition is really geared towards consumers. So perfect competition provides the lowest price for consumers, which is good for us as consumers. But for producers and investors, they make no money because these companies they make no profit based on the competitive nature of the market. So if you were investing, you would want to invest in monopoly or an oligopoly because you want companies that are in industries that don't have a lot of competition because they can set their price wherever they want, really, if they don't have a lot of competition, and then they can maximize profits. So if you can invest, one of the best investments is a monopoly or an oligopoly. Oligopoly is like an industry with like two or three or four main competitors. So Pepsi and Coca-Cola would be an example. So like they own a lot of the market. They own almost all the market of sodas. So like they own approximately like about 80% of that market. So they would be a good investment, a lot based on that. Also, Amazon, they own a large amount of the e-commerce market. And yeah, so any company that doesn't have a lot of competition. Bell and Rogers are an oligopoly. They own most of the telecommunications infrastructure in Canada, so that can provide a good investment opportunity too. So yeah, so more competition is good for consumers due to lower prices. Less competition is good for investors due to higher prices, thereby price to maximize profits. So there's a good and bad. So there is good and bad to perfect competition and low competition. Depends on who you are. If you're an investor, you would want low competition. If you're a consumer, you want perfect competition. So price elasticity of supply, this is just definition. We'll go through it more as the weeks go on. The change in the quantity supplied of a product due to the change in its price, known as price elasticity of supply. Price elasticity of demand, a measurement of the change in demand for a good or service in relation to its change of price. Law of scarcity, an economic system cannot produce all the goods and services that consumers want, and most consumers do not have the resources to purchase everything they want. So choices must be made about how limited resources, time, money are used. So factors of production, the inputs needed for creating a good or service, which include land, labor, entrepreneurship, and capital. So you have to choose what you can make with those. Opportunity costs, the potential benefits that an individual investor or business misses out on when choosing one alternative over another. Trade-off occurs when we choose one course of action over another. In economics, we can never have anything we want or need. We must make choices. A woman spends $10 buying her lunch at a local restaurant. She cannot use the same $10 to buy a book. A trade-off occurs. So the trade-off is you choose the restaurant over the benefits of the book. So because you chose the restaurant, you won't get the benefits from the book. So that's a trade-off in that situation. So visible hand stressed on the principle of laissez-faire, which means that governments should not intervene in economic activity. What does this mean? The market left on its own will come to a natural agreement regarding the quantity of goods supplied or produced and the price charged for these goods. This is because everyone is promoting their own interests. If people are free to pursue their own private interests, they act in a way that aids the economy as a whole. The idea that the market is self-regulating and does not need government intervention. So is this true? Like, can an economy run with just this policy? Yes, so Isabel's right. It could, but it wouldn't be a good idea because you need some sort of government intervention. Like you need regulations for like medicine. You can't just have a Wild West where medicine is put out there without any sort of trial. Like you need to have, you know, double-blind studies to check, like treatment and control groups to check if a drug works, if it. So there needs to be some sort of oversight. So that's important, having the Food and Drug Administration, having regulation, the EPA to prevent environmental damage and pollution. Like you need government regulatory bodies. You need the SEC to regulate stock trading, so there's no fraud, there's no insider trading, and you need oversight. Also, you need governments to come in to, potentially bail out a company. Like, for example, in 2008, Lehman Brothers, they were a bank in the United States, and a lot of people deposited their money with Lehman Brothers, and the government had to come in to help these people get their money back when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. So that kind of case, like helping depositors get their money back, that type of thing, government has to come in. But again, they can't, like, overstepping, like too much government regulation and government intervention is a bad thing, but too little is a bad thing. So you need to have a good balance. You need to regulate just enough so things are operating smoothly in medicine, in financial markets, in safety of aerospace, in safety transportation, and a lot of in safety policing, all those types of things. You need a certain amount of government regulation and intervention for those things, but not too much because you can't overstep either. So you need to find a balance. So what are incentives? Incentives is something that motivates a person to take a particular course of action. Costs and benefits influence our behavior, thus acting as an incentive. Remember the choices we are forced to make because of scarcity. What influences you to make a particular choice? So yeah, so that's a good question. So what influences you to make a particular choice? So like what motivates all of you?
If the price goes down,
Yes. So that's good. Yeah, there's an incentive there for cheaper, a cheaper option. Yeah, that's great. Buy one, get one free. Yeah, that's a great incentive. Yeah, so yeah, it's a great incentive. Yeah. So what else? Can you think of any other so great examples?
Would one be how much you need the item?
Yes, that's a good motivator. Yes. Yeah, like tax credits and large donations. Yes, that's a good incentive.
If I start making more money.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a big one that that corporations have. Yeah, so like making more money, commissions, bonuses, stock options, stock gains, those would all be under that umbrella. That's great. Also reward points. So like reward points from Tim Hortons and other companies. So they're a great incentive. People want to go there more because they're going to get the reward points. Like also Canadian Tire does a system too. So that so any incentive in that case, like reward points, etc. The also coupons. Coupons are a motivator to get the savings. So yeah, there's a lot of incentives out there that are very effective. So profit is a financial gain that equals the difference between the amount earned and the amount spent on operational costs. So excise tax is a legislative tax on specific goods and services that is purchased, such as fuel, tobacco, and alcohol. So we talked about this last week. The as they put taxes on those because they're not good. There's a lot of negative externalities from fuel through emissions. A lot of negative externalities, tobacco through lung cancer, alcohol through like health problems. So they put taxes on it to discourage use in a lot of cases and also generate a lot of revenue for the government. And also the other thing for this is people still buy these three things regardless of what it costs. So the government can tax a lot of it, put high taxes on it because people will pay whatever price for it because because they'll always buy it. Like the alcohol, fuel, people always buy it regardless of the price because it's very inelastic. So people like either need it or addicted to it or or any other factor. Like they just constantly buy it. So the government can tax it and the government will make a lot of money on the taxes because people will still buy it regardless. So that's why the government taxes these things because partly because they're bad in certain cases, like they're bad for either the environment, health, etc. And also they're going to make a lot of money because people are going to still buy these things regardless of whatever the price is. So they do that for yeah, those two reasons. So subsidies reverse tax where the government gives money to consumers or producers. So the subsidies used to increase supply. So the government of Canada is subsidizing housing. So they're making a housing policy to flood the market with houses. So that's gonna increase the supply of housing, and that will reduce prices for housing long term, in like at least for their units that they're producing. So economic efficiency, the quality of economic activity in which resources are used and goods distributed in a way that generates the greatest benefits to producers and consumers. So efficient is good, but then again, it's still unequal. There can still be a very high concentration of buyers and sellers. Like we said, it's a constant negotiation between buyers and sellers to get to equilibrium in the long term. So they're constantly negotiating together to get to the equilibrium in the long term. So demand is a schedule curve. It's the amount that consumers are willing and able to purchase a given price. It's during a specific period of time. It's other things equal, individual demand and market demand. So consumers' demand curve is downward sloping. So yeah, as price goes down, quantity demand goes up here. So if you link this over, I'm just gonna, so yeah, 5. So here, 510. Right here, 420, 335, 255, 180 here. So that's how it would be plotted in the graph here. So law of demand, so the negative or inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Other things equal as price falls, the quantity demanded rises, and price rises, quantity demanded falls. Reasons, law of diminishing marginal utility and income effect and substitute effect. So demand curve is the inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded shown in the graph. Quantity demanded on the horizontal axis and price on the vertical axis. Downward slope reflects the law of demand. Demand curve is a marginal benefit curve. So they add up all the individual demand curves here. So in this case, Joe has an individual demand curve, Jenna has an individual demand curve, Jay has an individual demand curve. So they add each of those together to get a total quantity demanded. So that's how they get quantity demanded. They add up all the individual ones. So all the people, all their quantity demanded, and they add it all up, and then they plot it on a graph. So yeah, so you plot all of it together. So quantity demanded together, total on the x-axis, and then price on the y-axis. So as you can see here, these are individual demand curves, and then you add those all up to get the market demand curve. So determinants of demand, change in consumer tastes and preferences, change in number of buyers, change in income, normal goods, and inferior goods. So change in the prices of goods, complements, substitutes, change in consumers' expectations, future prices, and future income. So in this case, corn, an increase in demand for corn would shift the demand curve right. A decrease in demand for corn would shift to the left. So this chart right here, this is located under week 1. So like it's chapter 3 PowerPoint under week 1. I'm just gonna put this in the chat. It's a great chart. And so I'll put it in the chat here, 3.78 on this PowerPoint. So determinants of demand, so change in buyer taste, physical fitness rises in popularity, increasing demand for jogging shoes and bicycles, cell phone popularity rises, reducing demand for landline phones, change in the number of buyers, a decline in the birth rate reduces demand for children's toys, change in income, rise in incomes increases demand for normal goods such as restaurant meals, sports tickets, and tablet computers, while reducing demand for inferior goods such as cabbage, turnips, and expensive wine. Change the price of related goods, reduction in airfares reduces demand for bus transportation substitute goods, decline in the price of Blu-ray DVD players increases demand for Blu-ray DVD movies, complementary goods, change in consumer expectations, inclement weather in South America creates an expectation of higher future coffee bean prices, thereby increasing today's demand for coffee beans. So this is a great chart showing the causes of changes in demand. Yeah, so I recommend, this is an excellent chart. It goes through like what causes changes in demand. So changes in quantity demanded, change in demand is a shift in the entire demand curve. Change in quantity demand is a move along the demand curve. So these are an important distinction. So I'll show you, I'll draw it out for you here. So if I draw it out here, the change in quantity demanded would be like if you just went down this curve. So if like you went from this point to this point, that would be change in quantity demanded. And then change in demand would be if you go from here to here. So it would be a shift. So change in demand is a shift. And it's so change in demand is shift like that. Change in demand is a shift of the demand curve. Change in quantity demanded is a movement along the demand curve. So that's an important distinction because they're two different things, and I'll show why they're two different things. Supply is the schedule curve. The amount producers are willing and able to sell at a certain price, individual supply and market supply. Law of supply, other things equal. As the price rises, the quantity supplied rises, and the price falls, the quantity supplied falls. So reason price X is incentive to producers. At some point, cost will rise. So yeah, an increase in supply would shift right, a decrease in supply would shift left. Yeah. Determines the supplier factor prices, technology, taxes and subsidies, prices of other goods, price expectations, and number of sellers. So I'll put this in the chat too. This is a great chart to reflect on. It's under 3.84. So yeah, it's a great chart. Just share it here. So the change in factor prices, so decrease in the price of microchips, increase the supply of computers, increase in the price of crude oil, reduces the supply of gasoline, change in technology, development of more effective wireless technology, increase the supply of cell phones, change in tax and subsidies, an increase in the excise tax on cigarettes, reduce the supply of cigarettes, decline in subsidies, state universities, reduce the supply of higher education, change in prices of other goods, an increase in price of cucumbers, decrease the supply of watermelons, change in producer expectations, an expectation of a substantial rise in future log prices, decrease the supply of logs today, change the number of suppliers, an increase in the number of tattoo parlors, increases the supply of tattoos, formation of women's professional basketball leagues, increase the supply of women's professional basketball games. So these are determinants of what supply would be. So equilibrium occurs when the demand curve and supply curve intersect, surplus, shortage, rationing, function of prices, efficient allocation, productive efficiency, and allocative efficiency. So yeah, anything above is a surplus, anything below is a shortage, and equilibrium is where they get to through negotiation. Rationing, function of prices, the ability of the competitive force of demand and supply to establish a price at which setting and buying decisions are consistent. So efficient allocation, productive efficiency, producing goods in the least costly way, using the best technology, using the right mix of resources. Allocated efficiency is producing the right mix of goods, combination of goods most highly valued by society. Changes in demand, the supply of goods constant, demand increases, equilibrium price increases, equilibrium quantity increases, supply of goods is constant, demand decreases, equilibrium price decreases, and equilibrium quantity decreases. So changes the supply, demand for a good is constant, supply increases, equilibrium price falls, equilibrium quantity rises. If the demand for a good is constant, supply decreases, equilibrium price rises, and equilibrium quantity falls. The application, government set prices, price ceilings, the maximum legal price a seller may charge for a product or service, rent control. So set below equilibrium price, rationing problem. It causes black markets and credit card interest ceilings. So here, if the government set a legal maximum here, they would cause a shortage. So this would be rent control. So rent control does this. So even though rent control is needed in a lot of cases to keep prices low for a lot of people, it does create a shortage here. So the demand would exceed the supply. There wouldn't be enough supply of housing in this case. So the government would have to, in this case, the government would have to provide more housing. So they would have to increase supply of housing, which is basically what they're facing right now. There just isn't enough supply. There's a shortage of housing, so the government's gonna have to come in to provide more housing. So so we are here now, basically here. and now the government is coming in to increase housing supply to provide a solution to the shortage. So we're at a shortage. So we are currently at a housing shortage because quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. Yeah. So I'll put this in chat here. So the way to correct it is if they provide more housing. So they have to provide more housing to correct it, really, which is what they're planning to do, and hopefully they follow through on that. So that's really the only solution here right now. So price floors are minimum price fixed by the government, e.g. supported prices for some agricultural products and current minimum wages. Set above equilibrium price, chronic surpluses, resource allocation problem. So in this case, this would be the minimum wage. It would cause a surplus of labor in the market, so there would be more labor supplied than demanded in this case. So there would be unemployment in that case due to the minimum wage. So this would be a minimum wage in this case. So minimum wage would cause this. So minimum wage is a price floor. Labor supplied is greater than labor demands, and also the supply management in Canada sets a minimum price for domestic milk products to drive US milk producers out of the Canadian market to protect Canadian dairy farmer businesses. So like these both operate like this. So they operate both in this system where the price is higher than equilibrium. So in this case, minimum wage is higher than equilibrium wage. And dairy and Canadian dairy products are priced higher than equilibrium price. So I'll ask the class, do we need this? Like, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Yes, not good for consumer. That's true. Is it good for the producer? Yeah, so the consumer would pay more because of these systems, which is true, and that does happen. But is it good for Canadian dairy farmers? Is it good for minimum wage workers?
Yes.
Yes, that's why they do it, because minimum wage workers will never get a raise unless they did this, because companies just don't want to pay more. They want to pay their workers as little as possible, which is the truth, because they want to maximize their profits as much as possible, so they reduce their costs as much as possibly can. So the government has to step in to provide a minimum wage that's higher than what employers are going to provide. So that's what happens here, and that's why they have a minimum wage. Also, Canadian dairy producers would a lot of them would go bankrupt if they had to compete with US dairy farmers, and specifically Wisconsin, because Wisconsin dairy farmers and like areas near Wisconsin in the US, they produce dairy at a much cheaper price and cost than Canada. So Canada couldn't compete with them uh, in a lot of cases. So that's why they price th that's why they have the system to price dairy higher so the Canadian dairy farmers can survive. So that's why it's bad for the consumer because it's more expensive. But the reason why they do it is just keep these dairy businesses going in Canada, and because the Canadian dairy market would not exist without supply management, and also minimum wage workers wouldn't get a raise unless we had this likely. So that's why it is bad for the consumer though, which is a negative point. That's one of the main negative points of this. So here we went through the examples of markets. We went through demand, supply, market equilibrium, and all these things. So we got